Good afternoon, everyone. This is Rabbi Bravo. We're here from our home in Woodbury. It's Sunday afternoon, and hopefully you're joining me for matzah making live. I know that many of us are used to buying a box of matzah like this, but today you can see how easy it is to make your own matzah. So hopefully this is a great Sunday afternoon activity for you. And while you are gathering, the first thing you need to do is make sure you preheat your oven to 500 because it does take a little bit of time to do that. I'm going to hold up the recipe for a moment. We're trying to get it into the feed, but if not, is that good?
Closer.
Here's the recipe. So everybody can see it. You can screenshot it, take a picture, so you have the recipe as well. We're trying to get it into the notes of the Facebook Live, but this is new for us as well. So everybody, if you're just joining us, I'm Rabbi Bravo. It's Sunday afternoon before Pesach, and we are making matzah today. So you need to have a few simple ingredients and tools. Number one, start your oven preheat to 500 because that does take a little bit of time. You're going to need some flour, regular flour, kosher for Pesach. If you keep a strict kosher for Passover home and you want this to be for Pesach, you need a little bit of olive oil. You need a little bit of salt. I actually have 3 different kinds on my counter: sea salt, regular salt, and kosher salt. And you're going to need a little bit of water, warm water. You need a couple of measuring tools. So if you have a large, this is a 4-cup one. Otherwise, whatever you have will make do. And you need a smaller measuring tool to be able to measure the tablespoon and the teaspoon. You can see I've taped my recipe up here so that it's easy for me to spot. Now, in addition to that, hopefully David's gonna make sure the camera stays with me. So the other thing that you need to have is some kind of a counter surface where you can roll out the dough. So I have one of these Wilton mats that we use for Pesach and a rolling pin. But if you don't, just clean your counter off really well. And if you don't have a rolling pin, look for something that can function as a rolling pin to be able to make the dough nice and thin. I happen to have in my kitchen, because we bake a lot, we have a dough cutter that looks like this, but you really don't need to have it. So once again, and of course, a large bowl to be able to do the mixing in. So once again, welcome everybody if you're just joining us. We have the ingredients here for making matzah. We're going to need flour, olive oil, salt, and a little warm water. And we're going to need a large bowl, some measuring tools, and a rolling pin and a space to roll it in if you have that. So let us begin. We're going to start by, if people are ready to begin, put in the notes that you're ready to begin. And if you're not ready and you need another moment to get organized, then just let us know. David is watching the notes and he'll be sure to relay the information to me. On a side note, if you want your matzah to be strictly kosher for Passover and to use during Pesach, it is intended to be made within an 18-minute time frame. I will tell you that if you make it in 18 minutes, in order to do that, you have to move pretty quickly. Also, this is a pretty large batch to make in 18 minutes on your own. So if you want to make the matzah kosher lePesach strictly, and you want to do it in the 18 minutes, then my recommendation is either to have the recipe or to simply have an extra helper or two helping you with rolling out the dough. So we're going to get started. Obviously, make sure you've washed your hands. I'm all prepared for that. And we're going to dish out our flour. So we need 4 1/2 cups of flour. flour. 4½ cups of flour. I'm hoping by now our recipe got online. Yes, David?
No, I can do it from here if it was somehow in my
It is. It's in pictures there.
Okay, in that case, I'm gonna do it.
So our recipe is hopefully going to get online soon. But in the meantime, 4½ cups of flour measured out. So this is 4, and I'm going to do another ½ cup.
Can't do it.
So 4½ cups of flour. Don't worry about it. I'm going to hold the recipe one more time up close to the camera so that you can see the recipe. One more time.
My hands in the way.
So if you didn't get a chance earlier, take a screenshot of the recipe. And here we go. So you've got your 4½ cups of flour in your bowl, and you're going to need somewhere between 3/4 and 1½ cups of warm water. So what I tend to do is I take my 2-cup measuring cup and I do about 1½ cups of warm water into my cup. I wind up using most of this, I will tell you, so that the dough is able to be rolled out. And we take our oil as well, and we're going to get ready to put that in. So we mix in about half of this water. So let's do about 3/4 of a cup to start, approximately. You're going to wind up with more than that anyway. And then you're going to take a large spoon and just start mixing. You could do it without olive oil, but it does add a little nice taste to it. So we're going to add in about 2 tablespoons of olive oil. This is one of the most simplistic recipes we could use, and we use this with our religious school students all the time. So you're just going to keep mixing, and you're going to see it's pretty heavily floury, if that's a word. So we're going to add a little more of that warm water into the mixture. So just add a little bit at a time now. Don't add the whole thing because you don't want it to be too moist. And if you can see what's going on in my bowl here. Here we go. So we're still mixing, still trying to get it moving. It's not quite ready, but we're going to keep mixing and put a little more water in ours. I will say that it does help if you are willing to get your hands a little dirty or you have some gloves. I know we're all desperate for gloves these days, but if you have some gloves that you can use in the kitchen, I'm going to switch from the spoon over to the gloves and start kneading it with my own hands. It's always a little bit better than a spoon. So here we go. All right, so use your hands and just kind of knead the dough back and forth. If it still feels real dry, as mine does, you're going to add a little bit more water to it, and then just keep kneading it. You want it to really start sticking together, but you don't want it to be liquidy. So you only add the water a little bit at a time so that it's not going to be liquidy. So it's starting, if you see mine's starting to look like dough, but not quite there yet. Now, of course, we use no yeast. I'm adding a little bit more water. So you can see almost all of the 1.5 cups is gone, but not quite. Of course, we don't use yeast because matzah is meant to be the reminder of when we were slaves in Egypt and we were then wandering and we didn't have time to let the bread rise, and so we don't use yeast, and that's why we make it in a very quick way. So if you look at my dough, you can see that it is definitely starting to come together as dough. I feel like mine is a So if you have time, and if you're not using this for Pesach, you can put the dough into the refrigerator. But if you are going to try and use this for Pesach, or you're in a hurry, then we are not going to put it in the fridge, at least not the whole thing. So I'm moving over here to my area where I'm going to spread out the dough so everybody can see my dough. It's definitely, not too moist, but definitely you don't want it too dry. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just use my dough cutter. You can just use your hands if you want. And I'm going to cut it into sections so I can work with one section at a time. So I'm just going to make 4 sections here. And then I'm actually going to cut each one in half. So we wind up with 8 smaller sections. We want the matzah to be pretty thin. So we're going to be rolling it out pretty thinly. So we want to make sure we have enough space to do that. Now we want to make sure that we have flour on our surface. So whether you're using a mat like I'm using, or you're just on a very clean countertop, you want it to be thoroughly floured. Hopefully you can see my mat from here. And you can start just with your hand, kind of pushing it down a little bit. It's okay if you get flour. Now, depending on how floury your dough is, you might want to put a little on your rolling pin because you don't want it to stick to the rolling pin. And you're just going to start rolling out the matzah dough. Okay, you want it to be as thin as possible. Are there any questions or comments in the notes that we need to pay attention to? I'm hoping you're enjoying following along. This is our first live cooking experience. So we're going to keep rolling. Now don't forget, if anybody came on late, make sure you have your oven on 500. Now you don't want too much flour down here, so you're going to flip your dough over. I find that helps so that it doesn't stick to the counter. And you're just going to keep rolling it till it gets really, really thin. Okay? And when you think you've done enough, keep doing a little bit more, and then you'll be where you want it to be. So for sake of time, I'm going to continue on to the next process. So you've got this piece of dough, and we have our trays ready to go. So what we're going to do is I'm actually going to use my dough cutter. You can use a knife, you can use a cup, and you want to cut this pieces the way you want them. So you can cut squares, rectangles, you can do round circles. I'll show you how to do that in a minute. If you want to make straight edges, you can do that. Whatever you want your matzah pieces to look like. If there's leftover dough that you think you might want to use again, just pile it in the corner. If it doesn't seem like you want to use it, you can always just toss it. If you want to do something round, then just take a glass, maybe like this one, and you just put it down, and just like as if you were making cookies, you can make a round piece of matzah. You might even have a cookie cutter, but you don't need one. And so here we go. We've got a few pieces of matzah ready to go. We're going to put the one tray in the oven. It gets really, really hot, and that matzah is going to go directly on there. I'm going to keep another tray over to the side here where I put the matzah that is done on this tray. So I've got a few pieces of matzah already rolled out. The next thing I'm going to do is take a fork, and I'm literally going to poke holes in the matzah. You all have eaten matzah out of the box, I'm sure, and you see that it has holes in it. So I'm poking holes in the matzah. You can do whatever design you would like, make it look really fancy or not. And once you have put the holes where you would like them, it's also about how the dough will cook is part of why we put the holes in, not just for looks. But once you've done the holes, then you can take a little bit of water if you would like. And if you have a brush, you can brush just a little bit of cold water on top. So we brush a little bit, just very lightly on top with the water. I need to add a little more water here. Okay, so you brush it, because if you want to salt it, which of course unsalted matzah is not so tasty, but if you want to salt it, you need the salt to be able to stick. So we brush it with a little bit of water, and then it's really your choice. This first one, I'm going to do some kosher salt. Just do it from above so it's not too salty. And once you have the salt on it, then go to the next batch and start rolling out your next batch. Make sure there's still some flour on the mat where you're going to be rolling it out. And then just start rolling again. So take your next eighth, the next ball that you have there, and start rolling it as thin as you can possibly make it. I want to know how everybody's doing. If somebody wants to post in the Facebook feed, you're welcome to do so. We'd love to see if you're on live with us. How's it going? Do you have any questions, any problems? Don't forget, when you think you've rolled it enough, turn it over and roll it a little bit more. Okay, we're making some large pieces for right now. And once you've gotten it really thin, then just cut off your edges and make the shapes. You could do, I'm going to do a triangle this time. You could do whatever shapes you want to make. Put your scraps in a pile. Okay. I'm going to do a couple just simple ones. There we go. And once I have my pieces, I'm going to move them over to the tray. And once again, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to take our fork. Here's the tray. Here's what it looks like. You can see the ones that I already did the fork and the salt. Now I'm going to do the fork on the next batch.
Line the sheets now. Line the sheets with anything now?
No, we do not need to line the baking pan with anything, because we put one pan in the oven and it's going to be really hot. So we don't need to put anything down on the pan. It has a little bit of flour still on the dough, so it's not sticking. And we don't need to line the sheets with anything. Okay. And once you've done the fork, then if you want to do salt again, just brush a little bit of water. If you don't have a brush, don't worry about it. You can just do it with your fingers. It's fine. And once you brush it with water, I'm going to use just some regular salt this time. So just do a little bit of salt. A little bit of salt on each one. And we're ready to move on to the next batch. So I see that mine needs a little more flour underneath, so I'm going to add a little bit of flour. We're going to try and do half of them. I happen to have large trays. You might not have as big a trays. If not, then you'll just use a couple trays. Once you have one tray ready, you can definitely put it in. Or you can wait till we're at that point. So we're going to roll this out again, just like we've been doing. Hopefully this can be a family project if you're at home with your family, and if you're not, it's easy to do on your own as I'm showing you here. Just keep rolling it out. Get some good muscles while you're rolling. Make sure it's really, really, really super thin. The last one I did probably wasn't as thin as it needed to be, so I'm gonna do this one a little bit longer. Make it even thinner than the last one. All right. By the way, people who don't have a rolling pin, you could be using a jar of some kind, whatever works. Okay, so we've got this pretty thin now. And once again, I'm gonna cut it down, use a knife, use whatever you have. Put your scraps in your pile. And do whatever shapes you want to do. Whatever the dough seems to look like to you, you can make those shapes, or you can make really fun shapes if you want for the matzah. If you want to do the round again, you can do that. All right, so I have 4 pieces this time. I'm bringing them over here. And this will probably be my last, maybe I'll do one more before we finish. So I'm gonna take the water again, just a little bit. Don't overdo the water, just enough. Oops, fork first. Do the fork first, then the water. All right, put your holes in. If you have a system, great. If not, no worries. Whatever you do is fine. It really is. We've made matzah with the youngest of children to the oldest of children, and it's a fun activity and everybody can participate. So no right or wrong, really very, very easy. So once you get all your holes done, then we do the water. I always forget that part, that you have to do the fork first. And then a little bit of water. And I think I might try the sea salt on this one and see how that tastes. Okay, so I happen to have a little sea salt. Whatever salt you want to do, we're on to salt. So spread the salt out. Ready, what we're going to do is you are going to take your hot mitt. Do not forget this, especially if you have working gloves on. You're going to take your hot tray out of the oven. You're going to carefully transfer your pieces from the tray that is not hot onto the tray that is hot. Just remember that it's warm, so don't forget that. It's easy to burn yourself on this part. If you don't pay attention. So I've got all my pieces going. You can keep them close together. Remember, they're not going to spread out. They're not going to grow. There's no yeast in here. The size they are is the size they are. Then put, sorry about that, everybody. What? Then put your mitt back on and put your pan in the oven. Now, I know that the recipe that I shared with you says that it cooks about 30 to 90 seconds on the top side, and then you flip it over for 15 to 30 seconds. But I find that it really needs a couple of minutes, but not much more than that. So I'm gonna have Alexa here turn on. Alexa, set a timer for 2 minutes. Maybe, maybe not. We're gonna use our old-fashioned timer then, just in case. And while we're waiting, start in on your next rolling. So I see I need a little bit more flour. And if the pan is really hot, then it will cook faster. So the pan that's in the middle. So we're gonna roll out one more time. And if you have more than one of you doing this, You could definitely have one person doing the rolling and one person keeping an eye on the oven. You could even have one person assigned to the fork and the water part and the salt if you have multiple people who are helping you. So we're back to, I'm only on my 4th roll here. Now you know why it takes a little while for this quantity to be able to do it. So again, if you want to do it in the 18 minutes, you probably want to do half the recipe at a time, or make sure that you have a few helpers who are going to be able to help you. So we roll it out as much as we can. And once you've got it nice and flat, then we're just going to go to the same process again. So we're going to cut the scraps off, make it the size and shape that you want. And once you have it, just put it on your cool pan. Don't forget, this one's your cool one. The one that's in the oven already, that's your warm one. And we keep it the warm one. Scraps in a pile. Up, there's our beeper. So, do not forget to put your mitt back on. Pull this out. You can see that it's very lightly brown, but not quite enough. If you can see, so I'm going to give it another, just 1 minute more. So I have the one batch out here, and I'm going to, I'm coming in or not? Because you're in the video. There came and went Sophie, apparently not here to help. She's busy doing her own thing. Okay. So we do the fork. And once we're done, by the way, some people like to make their matzah and put olive oil on top. You could definitely do that if you want. If you want to do that, put a little olive oil in a little bowl. Don't pour it directly on, and use a brush. If you don't have a brush, just use your fingers. But don't pour it right on, because you don't want that much on there. You just want a really light, gentle amount if you decide to do that. Of course, you all know that. There we go. We're going to check it. There we go. So it's starting to brown. Can you see it a little bit? Okay, and then what you're going to do is you're going to take some tongs of some kind. I tend to like these. But you're going to take some tongs and you're going to flip them all over. Okay. So make sure you flip every piece. And make sure you remember that the pan is hot. And we're going to put it back in for the other side. Again, it takes a little more than the recipe tells us, but not too much more. So I'm going to set it for 2 minutes. And that should be about it. In the meantime, I'm going to finish up here. So as I started to say, of course, you know when you go to the grocery store, there are lots of kinds of matzah now. There's onion, garlic, whole wheat, egg, but the basic matzah, this is really all it is. Flour, water, a little bit of oil, and that's it. So I'm going to brush it with a little bit of water again, and then I'm going to salt it. Going to go back to my rolling. Again, if you have more than one person, utilize them. You'll get this done a little faster and have them be rolling while you're doing the fork and the water and the salt. Okay. All right, we're back over here, halfway through. I'm going to do one more batch, and we'll put another batch in the oven. And of course, you'll all be pros by the end of this, so you'll be able to finish it up on your own. So just again, thin, thin, thin is the name of the game. Roll it as thin as you possibly can. If you think you're done, keep rolling a little bit more. Okay? Make sure you use a timer, because 2 minutes goes goes very quickly and you don't want to forget about it. Sometimes you only want to do 1 minute because you really want to make sure that it doesn't overcook. Okay, it also depends on your oven. We have an electric oven, so they cook a little bit differently than the gas one. Alright, so pretty thin. I'm going to just cut off my scraps and get ready for this last batch I'm going to do with you. So you can see that some of the pieces, I was told to bring it over, some of the pieces are starting to get done and look like matzah. Good. And a few are not, so I might give it an extra 30 seconds. So we're going to put it back in there for 30 seconds, which means I'm going to set my timer for a minute because I don't have a 30 seconds here, and keep an eye on it. And in the meantime, I'm going to finish up what I was doing over here. So just finish up this batch. And here's a few more pieces. Put it on here. I'm going to do the forks. All right, there's 30 seconds. So I'm going to take it out and see how we're doing. So I definitely have a few pieces that are done. So I'm going to show you what the done ones look like. You may want to flip them a little bit more just to see if you think that it's not brown enough. I always find that the first batch takes a little longer, and then after that it cooks a little faster. So I'm going to give it 1 more minute. And I'm going to finish with the fork over here, making our holes. And then, of course, do the water again. And then we'll add the salt. So we can do 1 more batch all together. And then you can finish the rest on your own. So we do a little bit of the water. The good thing about the water also is if you have a little bit of flour on top, the water kind of rids it from the flour. Okay, a little bit of salt. And this batch is ready to go. Now, these scraps at the end, if you want, you can take them all and they'll roll up right into 1 more nice little batch for you to do. So don't be shy to do that unless you feel like you want to throw them away. Here we go. And I want to just kind of hold up one of the pieces to show you that, David, how are we doing here? Good? Okay, so this is really what you want it to look like. It's starting to brown, and it looks like a nice piece of matzah. I'm going to take off the ones that are done. And I'm going to, remember we're going to use this same tray. If you're taking an extra minute or 2, that's totally fine. And you're probably realizing now that you have the first batch done, you're probably realizing that you really want to make sure there's no extra flour on there because it will come out floury. So I'm going to put the rest of these on here. They're all ready to go, and we're going to go right back into the oven. And here we go. Back into the oven. Start with 2 minutes and see how that goes. And of course, while you're waiting, you can roll out your next batch. If you still have dough that you're rolling, you might be faster than me, or maybe you have a helper, so you didn't take as much time, but in my circumstance, I'm by myself. I know you're all gonna say where's Sophie, but she decided to go for a bike ride instead of baking today. But that's okay. It's good for kids to get outside and do what they need to do. So, rolling it out while I'm waiting for the next batch. And by the way, if you want to make them for the Seder, you could make some nice large round ones or square ones. You don't have to cut them as small as I am. Those would be nice ones to use for your Passover Seder. So if you want to do that, just find something that works as a large round cutting thing. You could even use a bowl and turn it upside down, and that would be a good cookie cutter, so to speak, to be able to form the matzah into the right shape. So just make sure that it's thin, thin, thin. The thinner it is, the faster it cooks. So here we go. And for those who want, if you weren't able to grab the recipe, I will make sure that the recipe is posted on our website as soon as we finish up here. All right, nice and thin, we're gonna cut it. I'm gonna keep this one as two nice large pieces. Check the one that's in the oven. Don't forget about it, please. It needs another minute still. But again, don't think that you could just set your timer for 3 or 4 minutes, because you might come and find it overdone, and you don't want it to be overdone. So while we're waiting, I'm going to just poke some holes in my next batch. And I hope everyone is making wonderful plans for Passover this year. I know that we're all going to be in our own homes, but hopefully we're figuring out either how to be in our homes together with those who live in the same house as us, or maybe we're going to be FaceTiming or Zooming with family and friends in other locations. Whatever you do, just know that it will be a Passover I'm certain that everybody will remember. And for those who are interested, tomorrow at noon we're going to do a quick session on how to make charoset. So I'm going to flip these over. They shouldn't stick it all to your pan because the pan was so hot, but if they do, you can just use a spatula to take it off. And we're going to stick these back in for another 2 minutes. I'm going to finish up poking the holes in this batch over here. And once you are done, I'm going to show you, now that I can touch them because they're not so hot. Here's a couple of the pieces of matzah. This is what they look like. I'm going to move them forward so you can see. Okay. So now that you have the matzah, finish up the dough that you have, and we'll be able to enjoy and eat your matzah. Don't forget about the ones that are in the oven still, but I think you're good on your own. You don't need me anymore, and congratulations and mazel tov on your first batch, perhaps, of homemade matzah. Enjoy, and we'll look forward to seeing some of you online tomorrow, Monday at noon, for charoset making, and hopefully many of you will be with us for our virtual first night Passover Seder at 5:30 on Wednesday evening, April 8th, here on our Macomb Facebook page. Have
forward to seeing